that out. Hi, everybody. I am super excited to introduce a River Oaks member. His name is Damon Wallace, and he is the CEO of Billionaire Thoughts, which is a business coaching and consulting firm. His firm is ranked among the top 3 globally, not top 10, top 3. That's amazing. The secret to their success is found in the results that Billionaire Thoughts clients experience. There are many moving parts to the success of a business in general, but the lifeblood of most organizations come from sales. Damon has trained Fortune 500 organizations to improve their conversion rates, and we are super fortunate to have him here today to teach us how to master overcoming objections. It's a dear treat to introduce my friend Damon Wallace.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. I definitely appreciate you, and all the wonderful things that you do. You're the biggest connector and people person that I know. So I love being engaged with you, and thank you for taking the time to introduce me and inviting me to present for today. So with that, let me jump straight in. Let me ask a question of the group. So here's the question. If you can put a 1 in the chat if you're in sales as an entrepreneur, and a 2 in the chat if you're in sales as an intrapreneur, working for someone else or working with someone else. Okay, got a lot of 1s coming in. Because this helps me kind of guide part of the conversation. Okay, awesome. Now, while those are coming in, let me share a little bit about my beliefs when it comes to sales. Sales to me is like martial arts. I've been a martial artist since I was 13, and I have loved every bit of it. I've learned different styles. And as I've learned different styles, I've learned one key thing, that every style can't handle every situation. So you need to have a variety in your toolbox to be able to handle other things. Your ability to train through and learn sales and learn different techniques when it comes to sales and closing will help you out in situations as they come up, because every situation is not different. But what I'm sure you will agree with is that the common objections that you hear are similar time in, time out. Every time you go out and you hear someone say, oh, well, the price is too high. I'm going to talk to you about how the price is too high can mean 3 different things or more in many cases. So I want to make sure that we dive into this and just make sure that you're getting the most out of it. You feel free to ask questions at any point throughout this conversation, or if there's something that you just really want to understand more about, throw it in the chat. I've already, told the team, hey, listen, let me know if there's something that comes in so I can address it on the fly. I hate to get stuck on a certain point. So I like to get you, the information that you need so that you can maximize this day and actually get real value out of it. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and jump into today's presentation so that you guys have one more tool in your tool belt, or one more style, I should say, for your bag of martial arts. All right. So a little bit about us. So at Billionaire Thoughts, we actually have several different franchises that we have purchased. Our goal is to help entrepreneurs to have the highest level of success. And as I said, every one that we use has different strengths. Today, for mastering objections, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Grant Cardone way of handling objections. So this is a great format for you to start looking at as a template for how you handle objections in your business. All right, the first one we're going to talk about is, how do you master handling objections? The first part, I want to really go through your sales cycle. Everybody's sales cycle is going to be a little bit different, but where you get objections at in your sales cycle is going to matter in how we handle them. So the first area that we start to see where objections could come up at is in your prospecting. Sometimes we get no before we ever really even get into a proposal, or I'm not interested, or any of those kinds of objections that come up as we're going through the process. Part of our prospecting is really focused on what are we saying in the beginning level to get people to want to talk to us in the first place. It's our 30-second or 60-second commercial. It's our what are we saying to harness interest. And if what we say sounds like everybody else, we're going to start to get objections right out the gate. If what we're talking about doesn't pique the interest of the people that we're talking to, we're kind of dead in the water from the very beginning. So I want to teach you a concept real quick called WIFM. It's WIIFM. It is the station that people are listening to at any time when you're talking to them. Whether it's personal or whether it's business, people are tuned into WIIFM. What that stands for is what's in it for me. What's in it for me? As you're talking to someone in the beginning, they want to know, why should I even take the time to talk to you? If you don't give them a with them right up front, then the conversation is going to be dead early on. So I want you guys to think about, as you're talking about what you do, are you talking about it from the perspective of what's in it for you as the salesperson or the business owner, or are you talking about it from the perspective of what's in it for them as the person who's listening to you? Because remember, the station they're listening to is what's in it for me. The next thing that we're going to talk about is building rapport. As building rapport, that's about making sure it's not just about the small talk, right? It's not just about saying, oh, you like fishing, I like fishing. Right? Building rapport is going back to that thing, that common interest of how you might be able to serve them. Again, going back to with them, they want to know what's in for them. So even building rapport, it's about making sure that you build a connection, build a bridge, so that they know how what you're talking about or what you're doing can serve them. Number 3 is create interest. How do you create interest in your products and services? By using them. If you're not creating interest up front, again, you're going to get your objections are going to be hotter, they're going to be heavier. If you create a significant amount of interest up front, the objections that you're going to receive are not going to be the same. So as we're talking about some of these things, I want you to remember creating interest is probably one of the most pivotal parts of your entire process, because it's where the difference is going to be made. If I see a car that I'm really interested in, the price of that car now becomes a secondary concern, right? It becomes lower on the list of things as to what the costs are, what are the maintenance, all the other stuff becomes secondary to my level of interest in that particular car. If you're thinking about this in your business perspective, how do you create so much interest in your business that the objections are just concerns that need to be addressed? Determining their needs and wants. What do they want? What do they need? Right? It's weird, but sometimes people's needs will take backseat to people's wants. If somebody wants something bad enough and their need is not great enough, they'll put that need aside to go do something that they want or to buy something that they want. The next part, number 5, is your demonstration or presentation. Your demonstration or your presentation is critical, because if you've done it right in determining their needs, their wants, and their interests, your demonstration should speak to those things that they want or need. It should speak to all of the potential questions that have come up in the past. If you understand your business well enough and you know that you've done enough presentations and the same objections come up time and time again, then you want to handle those things in the presentation or demonstration as much as you can. One of my mentors put it like this. He said, if you handle the objection before it ever comes up, you take the power out of that objection, or you take most of the power from that objection. He gave the example that if I have to do a presentation and I show up to the presentation, someone's home, and I'm doing a presentation in their home, and I have this pink tutu on. Well, if I describe to them hey, listen, I have this on because my daughter has a recital after this, a ballerina recital right after this, and she felt really uncomfortable, and I had to really kind of help her through this level of uncover so she could be successful. It's something I just had to do as a dad, right? If that's something that they kind of address right up front, it takes some of the power out of that, and you're not thinking the whole time, oh my gosh, this weird guy's wearing this tutu the entire time, right? Or whatever, right? But that's an example. So the proposal should also handle some of those objections that should come up. Your proposal often could end up in the hands of someone who didn't hear your presentation. And if it ends up in the hands of someone who didn't hear the presentation, your proposal has to now speak for you when you're not there. And that's a big goal that we want to make sure that we're spending time going through as you're preparing. What does your proposal say when you're not there? All right, so here's a couple other points, right? So if you can't close sales, then it's going to cause even more objections. So how many times have we been in situations where we don't even ask for the sale? We just continue to talk about, what are the problems, what are the challenges, whatever, and we never ask for the business. Well, if you keep asking me, is there anything else? Is there anything else? Well, naturally, my mind goes to thinking of other things that could be wrong, as opposed to we find out what the real objection is, we handle that objection, and then we ask for the business. So some people can't close sales just because they don't know the process. They don't know how to do it. And some people, if you're looking at the objection from this standpoint, is for them, if it can't grow their income, that could be an objection, right? If it can't grow their lifestyle, if it can't do something for them, it can create objections just because it's not beneficial or valuable to them. All right. So, has anybody ever heard any of these objections before? Just, kind of throwing out a couple of them. Price is too high, right? We're just shopping. Has anybody ever gone to the store to go look for clothes or whatever, and all of a sudden somebody asks, hey, is there something I can help you with or help you find? And you just throw out, oh, I'm just looking, right? Here's the thing. You don't typically go to the Macy's or whatever because you're just looking, right? You typically are going because there's something that you have in mind that you want or need, and so you're going there for something. If you're going to a car lot, chances are you're not going just because you're just looking at cars. You're going because you want or need something. You may have heard, just send me some information or just send me a proposal, right? Happens all the time. That happens typically because we haven't gotten enough interest on the front side of it. All right, well, we don't need all of that. Or, please don't call back. Has anybody ever heard, don't call back? I'm good. Don't call me anymore. I don't know if you haven't, then you probably haven't done enough prospecting or sales, right? So I would encourage you to go talk to more people so that you can get some of these objections that maybe you haven't heard yet. All right, so I want to take a moment and I want to really clearly identify what an objection is first off, right? So we're going to clearly identify a couple things that are important here. One, an objection is, just by the dictionary, a reason or argument offering in disagreement, opposition, refusal, or disapproval. One of the ways that we're going to talk about as we're going through this is agreeing with your prospect. Doesn't matter what they say, right? I want you to get in the habit of agreeing with your prospect. How many people think, just by show of hands, how many think that it's helpful to get into a confrontation with your prospect? Right? It's just not a typical thing that we want to get into. It's better to be on the side with them as opposed to disagreeing with them. And so how we agree with them is a strategy, right? But we want to get on the same side with our prospects. Okay, so the second part of the definition is the act of objecting, opposing, or disputing a ground or cause for objecting. Sometimes there's a reason that they're objecting. And part of that is going back to that fact-finding stage. If we've done our fact-finding correctly, we may have a better understanding of why they're objecting to a certain thing. If we do a fact-finding for a small business and we see that their revenue is $100,000, and we're proposing a solution that's $50,000, that's half of their income for the year. Does anybody think that that might cause a pretty big objection right out the gate? Probably, right? And is it a reasonable one? Probably. They may not be able to actually afford what we're talking about unless we give them options for solving that in our overcoming objections process. All right, a feeling of disapproval, dislike, or disagreement. All right, here's a sales objection. So being more specific, the sales objections are ones where they are indicating an unwillingness to purchase. These are things like your price, your terms, your legal issues that may be around your product, the timing, etc. So this is a complaint. And this is important because I want to make sure that we understand the difference between someone who's complaining about something and something that is an actual objection. So a complaint is an expression of discontent, regret, pain, censure, resentment, etc. Right? So if you think about this from from a purchase perspective, if you went to, I'll use the car example again. If you went to go buy a car and everything else was right about the car that you wanted, except it didn't have one feature. Now, this feature may not be a deal breaker in you buying the car or not buying the car, but it would have been a nice one to have. If they bring that up, that is a complaint. It's not an objection because it's not going to stop them from doing the deal with you. It's just something that they're complaining about. If you are talking about a meeting, right? And the meeting is in person versus online. Well, if they complain about having to get up and drive to a specific location, doesn't mean that they're not going to drive to the location. Online may be more convenient for them, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to take action on that thing. So understanding the difference between when it's a complaint and when it is a real objection makes sense. All right, so I'm going to give you this list, right, and show you how even the same words can articulate two different things. So paying attention, listening, and having empathy in these things can make all the difference. And your fact finding along the way can make all the difference. The price is too high. It could be either an objection or it could be a complaint. So here's when it's an objection. When it's an objection is the price is too high. I can't afford it. I literally can't afford it. The price is too high. It just doesn't make sense for me. The price is too high in terms of a complaint. If my wife decides that she wants this purse, I may have a complaint that the price is too high. Does it mean that my wife isn't going to get the purse? Probably not. She's probably going to get the purse. I may just have that complaint that it was too high. So there's a difference. Now, if she says that she wants this, $500,000 purse that was on auction somewhere, no, we're probably not going to get that one, right? Then it may go back to the objection side. Okay, so the product isn't perfect. How many people have bought stuff that wasn't perfect? Anybody in here? No? Just me? Okay, so here's an example. How many people have a cell phone right now? Right? Got it? So with your cell phone, do they consistently do updates to your cell phone? Absolutely, right? It's not a perfect product. So in the world of a not a perfect product, if it's an airplane, this now becomes an objection. If you don't have a perfect plane, it could cause you to lose your life. This becomes now a real concern. If it's a cell phone and it's not perfect, there's always updates and other things. Okay, so again, you guys get the concept that we're going for. They sound the same, but how you've identified the difference in your product can make all the difference. All right, treat all objections as complaints until they're isolated and validated as legitimate objections. I'm going to explain what that means to you, right? I'm going to go through that over the next coming slides. But treat all objections as complaints until we have them isolated and validated. All right, so here's kind of the example of that. As we're looking at this, when you look at your overall objections and things, sorry, let me move one thing. There we go. As we're looking at the steps to mastering objections, here's what we're looking at. One, getting them to commit, getting them to actually, you taking responsibility for all of those objections that are coming up. And that's a hard pill to swallow sometimes, right? Objections are our responsibility. And here's why I say it's our responsibility. If it's not our responsibility, how do we if we don't take ownership of it, how do we solve it? You can't, right? You can't take ownership, or you can't solve a problem that at some level you don't take ownership for. The next thing you want to do is define what the real objection is. In defining what the real objection is, you're really taking time to ask the questions, because at the end of the day, the real objection is only going to come down to a few things. But people will give you all kinds of objections that aren't the real one because they don't want to say it. Let's say money is the objection and they can't afford it. Most times they're not going to tell you, oh, I can't afford it. What they're going to say is, I'm not sure if this is the right time. I think maybe we'll look at this or revisit this at a later date. Oh, I need to go talk to my partner about this. They're going to say all kinds of stuff, except for it's the money, if they're embarrassed that it's a money thing. Or if they are not used to saying no to something or don't like saying no, they'll give you other things. They'll blow it off. They won't take the phone call. They'll do other stuff. So defining what the real objection is, why are they not moving forward, is part of what we want to get great at. Identifying the location. This means in your sales process. When in your sales process, are you really getting this objection? Are you getting the objection in the very beginning and they just don't talk about it until later? Is it something that's happening when we go to do our proposal? When are we getting the objection? And that helps us to understand when we need to solve for it. So identifying the objection versus the sales process means that you need to understand what is part of your normal sales process versus what's a real objection. Because there's times where you haven't gotten to that particular answer yet, right? There's times where you haven't gotten to that point. And sometimes that means that you need to adjust your sales process to address that thing sooner. If that's something that you need to address early in the sales process, knowing that can make the difference. Prepare until you can predict. You don't always know what's coming. You don't always know what's going to happen. But if somebody does something or some action happens time and time again, you can kind of get a feel for what they're going to do. Poker players are great at that, right? The first time you sit down and play with somebody, you may not pick up on what their tells are. But over time, you can figure out, okay, when they do this, that means this. You want to get to the point where you can understand your prospects, your potential clients the exact same way. When they say this, oh, this means this, and this is probably where they're headed. Now, you still ask the questions to make sure that you've clearly identified it, but at least now you can kind of predict where the conversation is going. The next one is practice until you master it. I mentioned martial arts a number of times throughout this, right? At some point, the difference between the kick that the side kick that a black belt does and a white belt does, it's the same kick. It's the number of times that they've practiced it and the level of mastery that they approach it with. As entrepreneurs, as sales professionals, we need to take our profession seriously. We need to practice it. We need to be in the mirror practicing our closes, practicing our overcoming objections, practice those things until we get great at them, and even then continue to practice. So number 8, work on those every day. All right. So here's the types of objections. So you have internal objections. Internal objections are those things that they're saying to themselves. They're not necessarily communicating with you, but internally, they kind of have a reason or have something that they're objecting to it with. External are those things that they are, that are obvious, right? They're showing that there's some level of concern, that it's important to them on this level. There's valid ones. And I'm going to dive into these a little further, but there's valid ones, right? Some objections are valid. Again, if there's a car or something that you can't afford, and no matter what you want, no matter how bad you may want it, if you can't afford it, that's a valid concern. That's a valid objection. There's valid, but it won't necessarily stop you from buying. That's another one, right? So an example of that would be, yeah, it's out of the price range that I said that I wanted, but if I wanted to stretch my budget a bit, I could get it, right? That's a valid but. Then there's invalid. If I say that this is too much, and at the end of the day, if I can afford it, and it's within the budget that I came in, and now all of a sudden after I've gone through my proposal and everything, somebody says, oh, well, it's too much. Well, it's not really a valid one, right? I know that you can afford it. It's just whether you decide that this is something that you want to do or not. And if you can afford it, the price objection is not necessarily the real objection. It's that there's a issue with them seeing the value of what you presented. Because if you got the money and it makes sense that you can buy it, you'll probably do it. If it doesn't, because what you're proposing is just not quite what you want, then now the price becomes an issue. All right, the next one is spoken. There are some objections that people will speak. They'll say it to you. There are some objections that are unspoken. Those are critical because those unspoken objections, if you don't know, how do you address it? All right, so I'm going to use all of these, going back to the example of how all of them, they can sound the same, but digging in deeper into the objection will help you understand what those differences come out to be. Handling objections is really a fundamental issue of getting good at asking the questions to identify what the real problem is. So internal, if someone is thinking, oh, it's too high, right? But they don't really express it the same way, right? They think about it to themselves, but then they say something else like, oh, I need to talk to my spouse about it, right? That's something that you can't quite handle if you don't really get to the bottom line, right? Maybe they've made bad decisions in their life and their spouse knows it. And so their spouse has a limit on what they can do or not do without, kind of having some consensus, right? But if you don't know that because all they said was this too high, well, then, you can't, it's hard to deal with that. So we want to take deeper dive. If they express it and the external is too high, and they look to their partner and say, kind of that little glance, well, they're looking for approval from their partner, right? Again, same situation, but now they've expressed it, and you can address it based on those. Okay, so valid. I talked about this a little bit before, so I won't dive too deep into it. If they say it's too high and they can't afford it, then that's valid. If it's invalid and they say it's too high, it's just that they don't want to do it and they don't see the full value of it. Spoken of being it's too high is an example of, they're telling you what they feel like the problem is. And if it's real, now you go to validating or invalidating. If it's unspoken, you have to ask questions to get it out of them. Always ask questions and dive deeper into their objections, whether they're spoken or unspoken. If you are looking at them, most of us can look at the person and kind of tell that we've got them engaged. They're leaning forward. They're doing all the buying signs and all the other stuff versus someone who's completely disinterested in what we're talking about. Is that fair to say? Right? So if it's unspoken, you need to get good at asking those questions to really get to what their real objection is. All right, here's our number one secret about objections. You are the creator of every objection and must take full accountability for whatever that objection may be. Let me explain what I mean by that. If you are getting one common objection over and over and over again, then that means that something in your sales process has not handled that particular objection, hasn't painted the value, hasn't, taken note of some important area of handling that objection. Or if you feel like there's something that's a problem, whether it's price, whether it's, lack of confidence in your service or whatever, you're going to start to project that. If you know that you kind of have an area where you're not as confident about your product or service or whatever, you can project that to your potential clients. They pick up on it, and now they have objections based on something that you did or said. Does that make sense? If you are not necessarily in control of a certain aspect of your process, then you need to make sure that you distinguish that as much as possible or overcome it in other ways. So let's say you're talking about, let's say you offer life insurance, and the price of the life insurance is the same whether you talk to me or whether you talk to John Smith down the street. You can't handle objections on price by just discounting, right? That's not even an option for you. Okay, so how you need to handle that objection is build value in other areas before you get there. The next thing that I want to hit is the most dangerous, again, being the unspoken. How do you get to the unspoken? How do you get to the bottom line when someone won't say what it is? That goes back to your fact finding. That goes back to understanding the person that you're talking to and not being afraid to just ask tough questions. Here's an example. So we have one of the people that we have been talking to probably for about 6 months. And he just would not really just tell us what it was that wouldn't get him to move forward. And then we found out that part of the year, he actually does some offshore stuff with oil and gas. And so he wouldn't say that I don't have the money until this season pops up where I'm going to go do more with this contract on offshore rigging. Okay, well, if you had said that, we had gotten to that, right? Then we could have said, okay, well, let's work our pricing or our terms a little bit different as to when you make your investment, yada, 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 right? But because he didn't say it and we didn't do as good of a job as we could of identifying it, that process went on about 5 months longer than it needed to. So we had to take ownership of that. All right. Number three secret about objection. So most objections, again, are complaints and should not be handled as objections, right? Handle them as complaints. You got to deal with them, right? You got to acknowledge them. You don't always have to solve them. Every complaint doesn't have to be solved for you to move forward. Is anybody in here in a relationship? All right. So I'm gonna pick on somebody for just a second. So Moose, can I pick on you for just a second? You're on mute. All right, Moose. Have you ever dated someone that wasn't quite perfect, but you still went on a date with them?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Absolutely, right? So they didn't necessarily have to have all of your objections met, but have you also, talked to someone and said, "Oh my gosh, this would never work. I would never want to go on a date with you," right? Because you're just horrible, right?
Absolutely. I try to be a better judge, but yeah, it does happen.
Absolutely. So that's where we're talking about in terms of the objections versus the complaint. Like as an objection, we would say, no, I don't want, I'm not doing that. I don't want to be involved at all. As a complaint, people aren't perfect. We're humans, right? And so we can overcome those things. It's the 80-20 rule. Has anybody ever heard of the 80-20 rule? Moose, have you heard of that? Right?
Sure.
So if someone is 80% of everything that you want them to be, you wouldn't sacrifice them because of the 20% of the things that maybe aren't quite where you want them to be. They're not deal breakers, but they're not perfection either. Right?
Yeah. I will say it's been 28 years since I've had a date. So I've been happily married for a hell of a long time.
That's because she is 100% perfect, right?
Yes, sir. Very lucky.
Absolutely. Great answer, Moose. All right. Thank you for participating.
My pleasure.
All right. So number 4, objections are never a reason to not close or stop the sale. So when you think about an objection, even if it is a real objection, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to move forward. I bought, so I like cars, right? Obviously, I've said it a few times, right? I like cars. And, there's times where I've bought a car because I like so many other things about the car. And maybe one thing was that thing that I just didn't care for. So the car I have now, it had everything that I loved about the car. I didn't find out till later that it didn't have the premium sound because I wasn't really paying attention to that because I fell in love with so many other aspects of the car. I was like, oh my gosh, it's got the midnight pack. It just blacked out. It's great. I love it, right? I didn't even think about the premium sound until later after I'd already bought the car. I was like, man, something is different about this car than the last one I had, right? It's the sound. Got it. So an objection, something that would have been a problem, had I even thought about it, didn't stop the sale, didn't stop the close. Most of us get back down into having to answer every single thing before we move the deal forward. All right, number 5. Secret about objections. So there's only one objection, never more than one. Some people say, oh my gosh, that's absolutely not the case. My clients come up with, tons of objections. They come up with a whole bunch of reasons as to why they don't want to move forward. But the reality is it comes back down to one. Would anybody like to give an example of an objection or a time when they got more than one objection?
I do.
Thank you. So give me any example that you got. When was the time that you had more than one objection or what that might not have been?
You know what? if you present, they say, well, again, I think we've probably been over this, but I need to check with, my partner. And I think you've already, now that I think about it, you probably already addressed that. Oh, you know what? I know I would like to see if my company is going to pay for it. And if they do, I'll move forward. If they won't, then I won't. How many other people out there have ever had that?
A ton of people have had that particular one, right? So typically how we would deal with that is, one, learn more about their process, right? Learn more about what that, that the process of dealing with that, or how do they do the approvals and all the other stuff, right? Because at some point they may say that, oh, if I go ahead and move forward with it, my company reimburses me. Okay, well then let's move forward, right? That's not a reason not to move forward. If I'm talking to you about this one, and let's say your company is going to reimburse it because you want to join a particular networking group. Let's say you want to join, NIA, right? Or somebody wants to join NIA, and they say, well, my company will pay for it. I'm in sales. My company typically will pay for these things. And if I do it, they reimburse me. Okay, awesome. I'm excited to hear that. So if for whatever reason your company did not reimburse you, do you see the value of being able to connect with, all the entrepreneurs that are within this network, and where you could actually get a great return on your investment, even outside of your organization? So if they say yes, then now you've got the permission to still move the ball forward. If they don't, then the real objection was that they didn't see the value enough for them to pay for it for themselves. Are you with me on that?
Sure, 100%.
We want to make sure we identify what the real objection is, because if I see something that's phenomenal and I think that I'll get a return on investment for it, it'll make sense for me to do it, regardless of whether my company pays for it or not. That's a bonus. Think of it like tuition reimbursement for education. Like if I want to go back to school to get my master's and my company may pay for it, then that doesn't necessarily mean that it's to make it or break it as to why I would go back to school for my master's or not. It's a great value add if my company does pay for it, but if they don't, I'm probably still going to do it anyway if I wanted to do it. So getting to the real objection, there's usually one, and it's not necessarily the one that they talked about. All right, so here's some of what objections can be. Okay, so some things are like price, term, contract, the timing, the company itself. It may be you. Maybe you're part of the reason for the objection, right? It could be your competition. It could be buyer uncertainty. It could be things that other people have said about your company, third-party data. It could be confusion about what you do and how you do it and what value you can bring to them. It could be just a lack of information. They haven't taken the time to look at all the information and all the wonderful things that you could do for them. So here's an example when it comes to how you can deal with price, when it comes to even using other objections to help you solve for another problem or something they brought up. So let's say someone said price was the objector or objection. Then terms might be a solution to fix the price problem. So you're using one objection to be able to solve for another one. So if in fact, I want to buy a company and this company wants $2 million for me to buy the company, I may offer them $2.5 million to buy the company. Why would I offer them more to buy the company? Because I want them to accept the terms that I want to offer them. Instead of giving them $2 million up front, I may offer them $25,000 a month for the next 100 months, whatever it may be, right? Because I can now use cash flow from the business to be able to pay for the business itself. So looking at what you're getting from an objection, look at the ways that you can solve that particular thing. And sometimes it's using other people. If, let's say, again, using number 6 and number 8 on this list, let's say there's an objection about the company. Well, you may be able to use the competition as a reason for them to move forward. If in fact you are number one in your space or in a very particular space, and they say, well, I'm concerned that, the company isn't great at all of these other things, right? They're great, your company isn't great at X, Y, and Z. That may be perfect. I agree with you. I understand, but we're good at A, B, and C. And what you really want is A, B, and C. The X, Y, and Z is not what you're looking for in this moment. So let me be the best I can be with A, B, and C, because if you look at our competitor, they're not matching the sweet spot that we are. I consulted with Xerox, and one of the things that they would go in and they would talk about is they would talk about their product, but they wouldn't address the price that they had as a major issue. Like they would just kind of let it kind of go by the wayside, and they would at the end of the presentation say, "Oh, by the way." So what I started their sales teams doing was I would have them talk about the pricing up front. Talk about not necessarily the dollars and cents of it, but talk about the fact that they were going to be a higher price point. Talk about it up front. So if they ever compare you with someone else and they're a lower investment, you've already addressed it. You've taken the steam out of it. And how I would have them address it I would have them, they already are using competitor, let's say Konica as an example. They've already got Konica devices in their office. Great. You print out some of your high quality marketing items on your Konica machine. Send me those same documents. I'm going to print them on my high quality Xerox machine. I'll bring them and let's look at them together. CMO of marketing, let me ask you a question. What is your image worth to your organization? Well, it's priceless. Absolutely. I agree with you. When you leave this document versus this document with your prospects, which one do you think leaves you with a better image? You're looking at this one, it's all fancy and the color is awesome, it's sharp, it's everything, right? And you're looking at this one that's just, okay, right? Every time they would say, oh, well, this one, absolutely, awesome. The difference between this one and this one is less than a penny. You would agree that if your image is priceless, that's worth more than just a penny, wouldn't you? Absolutely. So now price is thrown out the window because I use the competitor as the thing to compare from a price perspective. Does anybody have questions on that? Going once, going twice. All right. So here are the steps. So I talked about whether it's valid or invalid. Okay, so here are the steps to determine whether it's valid or invalid. First, you listen. Second, you acknowledge. Okay, in acknowledging, it's not that you always have to just do the head shake, right? You want to actually repeat back to them that what it is that they've talked about. You want to bring it to their attention that you understand. Absolutely, I completely understand. Our prices are typically about 30% more than the average, marketplace competitor. And we don't apologize for that because we made a decision a long time ago that we would rather apologize for the price once than the quality time and time again, right? So the second or the third thing, you want to isolate. You want to get to the real objection. You want to get to what's most important. And one of the questions in isolating is really asking, okay, so if we can handle that or we can solve that for you, with that, would you move forward? I'm going to break down these a bit more individually. The next thing you want to do is validate their objection, that you understand it, that you got it. Don't, focus on whether you need to either deal with it or discount it right away. Probe till you get to a single objection, and then close. People forget to close. Reminder once again, close. Coffee is for closers, right? You want to make sure that you're closing on every occasion that you get. Don't wait until the end of the sale to just close. You want to have many closes all the way through your presentation. So in step one, you want to listen. Let me write this down. Please tell me more. Okay, I got it. What else? Tell me more. Okay, thanks for sharing. Tell me everything. You want to get them to list out every single problem, every single complaint, every single thing that they can think of right out the gate. The reason for this is because it helps you to get clarity on what you need to address up front and what is not necessarily as important to address later. The second one, acknowledge. You're right. I agree with you. I can see that. I'm in total agreement. I feel the same way. I get it, right? This is acknowledging what they said. My wife hates it. She absolutely hates it. She knows what I'm doing, so she hates it. If she says something and she's trying to start, a disagreement about something, you know what? You're right. I agree with you. I can see where you're coming from. And she hates it because if she wants to have an argument, how do you argue by yourself? Right? It diffuses situations, diffuses objections pretty quickly. And it's not that you're doing it you're not doing it in a sarcastic way. Like you're doing it in a real way of empathy. I get it. You're upset. I should have taken the trash out. I understand. You're right. I apologize. Let me go take care of that right now. Step 3, isolate. What are your other concerns? What else bothers you about that? Do you have any other reasons for not moving forward? Do you have any other objections? If I could solve that one thing, would there be anything else? Most of the time, what we do is we just let people kind of give us a laundry list of reasons why they don't want to do something. Or worse yet, they just don't tell us anything, right? If we're not asking for these things, then we'll never know why people aren't moving forward with our product or service. Step 4, validate. What's your real objection? What's your real concern? There's got to be something else. When you say that, what do you mean? Why do you say that? If you'll notice, most of these handling objection things that we're talking about today are just asking more questions. They're just asking for greater clarity. You could almost create a phenomenal objection handling by just asking why several times, right? Because at some point, people run out of excuses and they just tell you the real thing. And that's what you want to get to. Because if not only does it delay your resources, it delays your time. You can get to a no faster and you can move on to the next prospect instead of just constantly dragging out the same sales process over and over and over. All right. Big bonus validator. Then that wouldn't keep you from owning it, would it? Or doing business, would it? or buying or yada, yada, yada? Would it? Because even if it is, now you can create the difference between it being a complaint versus the real objection, right? So that's a great way of identifying whether it's important. If the color of the car wouldn't stop you from buying it, that wouldn't keep you from owning it, right? Everything else is perfect about it. We've hit every other thing that you've asked for. We got the price point that you want. The color wouldn't keep you from owning it, would it? All right, step number 5, determine the type. This is about understanding what type of objection is it really. Going back to that, is it a valid one? Is it invalid? You want to ask more heavy probing questions. Why do you say that? When you say that, can you explain? Sometimes if someone doesn't really want to give you the real reason because they're embarrassed or whatever, it can create a moment of hostility. There's a phenomenal book that's out there. It's called The Challenger Sale. So if you've never heard of it, here's the general concept of it. There are times where you have to be okay with raising the tension of the situation and then learning to diffuse it so that you can get to the real heart or real crux of the issue, right? So as you ask questions, if someone gets uncomfortable, they can begin to raise the temperature of the conversation because they're uncomfortable. I don't know if you've ever done that. I mean, we're all, kind of perfect humans on the call, right? But there's times where other imperfect humans will get frustrated because we know that we either are in a situation where we don't want to explain everything or whatever the case may be. Well, the same thing is happening in your customer's life. Empathy is one of the biggest things that you can have. Empathy and understanding where they're coming from and how you can help them move from point A to point B. Brad Sugars, who's the founder of Action Coach, he talks a lot about sales being the concept of professionally helping people to buy. And that's what we're doing. If we know something is good for them, can help them, and we have confidence that we can help them, we're just professionally helping them to buy. All right. So in the internal side, right? Because this could be some of the, could be some of the biggest things, we cause confusion with, right? So in the internal process, we're really focused on why the customer is either buying or why they're objecting. If I have a concern about the safety of a product, well, my concern about the safety of that product could be a result of a situation that happened in my family, right? If I have a concern about the safety of motorcycles, it could be because I know someone in my life or my family or whatever that had a terrible motorcycle accident. Understanding why an objection is taking place is important. It's critical to understanding how do you continue to move past or not. Or how do you navigate it? Can anybody think of an example that someone may have had a why that was stopping them from buying, stopping them from moving forward? Or a situation that they've encountered that stopped them from or caused them to have an objection? Cordy, I'm going to pick on you.
Oh, I just raised my hand. This is Tony.
Okay.
Can you see my hand? So the question is why the buyer is objecting?
Yeah. What would be a reason that's an underlying why, like a reason that has happened around their life that why they're objecting.
Okay. So I'm a Network in Action franchise owner and I sell memberships to Network in Action. So sometimes maybe they've had a bad experience with networking in the past, and they are not feeling like this is going to be any different.
Okay, perfect. So as you start looking at your business, look at what you have, what resources you have within your business, what aspects of your business, what guarantees you have in your business that could counteract that kind of objection. NIA has a phenomenal, right? What's the guarantee that NIA has that, if it's not necessarily, if you don't get the results in a certain period of time, you have the ability to continue on for another year to help you get to it, right? There's other stuff that you can do. For us, our primary business is business coaching. For our one-to-one coaching clients, we guarantee that we'll find our fee within 17 weeks, or we continue coaching them for free until we do. We know, just based on our track record, that we typically find that our fee, typically pay for ourselves in the first 2.5 to 3 months. So we made our guarantee, we'll do it within 4 months, or we'll continue to coach you. If you had a concern about whether it was going to give you a return on investment, does that start to, to handle that right out the gate? And if you continue on in that line, is that the real objection? Right? Does that make sense to everybody? If I handle that objection and you continue to proceed, there's something else that's on your mind that's stopping you from moving forward. Do you agree with that, Tony?
I do.
And our job is to then understand, is that objection valid or is it invalid? If you haven't gotten results in other networking avenues that you've done, well, guess what? I'm so excited to tell you that we have phenomenal training here on how to help you get the best results out of your networking. We have these training courses to teach you how to do better sales, how to do better prospecting, how do you do all this other stuff so that you can get a greater return on your investment. And by the way, if you don't, you have the option to continue on for another year to make sure that you're maximizing and getting the most out of your membership. If I say no, is that a valid objection or an invalid objection at that point? It's invalid. Okay. So acknowledge the complaint and then close. Acknowledging the complaint is not the same as solving the complaint. I don't have to solve all of your complaints for you to move forward. Only the ones that will stop you from moving forward. And if it stops you from moving forward, it's not a complaint anymore, it's an objection. A complaint is, I don't like this haircut, right? If I don't like this haircut, well, my hair is already low. Well, just shave it off, right? Fine. Doesn't mean I'm never going to come here again. It just means that this particular time it wasn't right. It's a complaint, right? Okay. Step 6. So this is knowing how to transition your business to a close. You got to practice the close. You got to practice the close, because practicing the close is where you get the money. It's where you ask for the business. If there's anywhere you got to get it right, it's this place. Knowing how you transition from someone having an objection and into your close is paramount for your business. And so my recommendation for you is, again, practice this. Practice going from, great. Was there anything else that if I can help you with this one thing, is there any reason that you wouldn't move forward? And then handle that one thing. And then after you've handled it, if it was the one thing and you've done a good job up to that point, validating it, isolating it, and all the other stuff, you earn the right to ask for the business. Don't be afraid to ask for the business. Don't say, okay, well, I've got that, let me know what you think. And, I'll follow up in a couple of days and, let's touch bases next week. No, you isolated, you validated, you got all that stuff there. Ask for the business then. A lot of times we don't ask for the business. And so we're going back and chasing people later to try to get them to say yes, when we already had them in the moment. Excitement has already gone. All right, so there's the ebook. So there's a link. So I'm going to ask the team. So Daniela, can you put that in the group? So there's a link for you to get the 20 rules of closing a deal. So click on that link. Make sure that you sign up for that, and you'll get that ebook to, again, kind of go through some of that part. Because, again, understanding how you close and how you go through that process, none of the other stuff matters if you don't know how to close the deal. All the other stuff is just setting you up for that stage. So make sure you go through that. And I'm going to give everyone, well, my email address is actually on the list. So you'll have access to me if you have any questions on that particular or anything that wasn't necessarily covered today. We'll have an opportunity to engage and dive deeper into that. But for now, what I want to do is I want to kind of open up the phone lines, right? And open up the lines here and just talk about any of those objections or any of those questions that you guys have and how we might be able to overcome those.
All right, we got 5 minutes left. If anybody wants to go ahead and unmute themselves or drop a question in the chat or a comment, go ahead and feel free.
I just want to add that I appreciate where you're saying to practice the objections, to anticipate and practice them, overcoming them. So thanks for the reminder on that. And I'll be re-listening to this and sharing it with my group.
Thank you.
Right on. Thank you, Tony.
Any other questions?
I wanted to just say something that I think it's good to sort of review yourself a little bit every once in a while. I notice that when I'm getting ready to go on vacation, I generally close a lot of business right before I leave. My office gets very happy about that because they're all worried that I'm not going to be there, but I usually turn in a lot of business. And in thinking about why was that, it's because I feel urgency that I'm not going to be there, and I push a little harder. And so sometimes you can, you could be doing a little more to close something and be a little bit more urgent about it, because like I said, that's a real thing that happens in the world, but I can make my own, I can change that about myself and the way I close to be a little bit firmer about trying to close a little faster and therefore leave more time to do more deals and not lose some deals that might not close if you did wait.
Yeah, agreed. Just a heads up. So I had an issue with the URL. I'm not sure why that is broken. It's given this security thing, and so I ended up having to disable that one. So please use the link that's there in the chat.
And I went ahead and drop that link one more time. All right, y'all. Well, we are running right up to the wire today. So I do want to thank Mr. Damon Wallace for this presentation today. It was awesome. You packed a lot in there, man, and we have a lot of value. So definitely, if you came in halfway through the meeting, definitely check out the replay. It's going to be posted shortly. Jennifer, thank you for introducing us to Damon. And if you guys got value out of this, be sure to check back on the first, third, and fourth Wednesday of every month. We have our Network with the Nations the first Wednesday. On the third Wednesday, we have our Sales Mastery like today. And the 4th, we have our speaker series, also known as the Focus Forum. Do check that out. In the coming months for the holiday season, we will not have some of these meetings, so definitely keep an eye on the calendar, but we will be in touch via email letting you know. So keep an eye on those save the date newsletters for what's coming up. So our next meeting will be on the first Wednesday of next month. That'll be our Network with the Nations. So once again, thank you, Damon. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for everyone for being with us today. I do appreciate you, and we'll see you next time. Have a great one.
Thank you.